Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Select Board on January 3rd, 2022. I'll start by calling the meeting to order with a roll call for attendance.
Dan Mantrek, present.
George Bailey, present.
Jim Sakosha, 21 James Henry Drive.
Andrew Knapp, 96 Lindsay Point Road. If everyone would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Looking for a review and approval of the agenda for this evening. Have anything they want to add, amend, change?
I have nothing, sir.
Anyone else? Hearing none, looking for a motion to approve the agenda as drafted.
Motion to approve the
Second.
January 3rd, 2022 agenda as drafted.
Seconded by Select Person Mantrek. Roll call vote.
Mantrek, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Knapp, aye. This time I'll open up the first of two public comments.
If anybody's participating virtually and like to wager a public comment, you can raise your hand, or if you're participating on the phone, you might have to press *6. Speak up, wait to be recognized by the chair. Be another opportunity for public comment towards the end of the meeting.
Give it 15 more seconds. All right. This time I'll close public comment. We'll have to save their piece till the end.
Or during the public hearing.
Or during the public hearing. So this time we have the public hearing for the 2022 proposed operating budget of $7,647,871. Anything for discussion? Select Person Bailey.
I would, if there's no comment, motion to approve without objection.
Oh, you're not getting off that easy. I got a little presentation for you, gentlemen. And more importantly, for the community.
Yeah, probably got it.
I withdraw my motion.
I don't know. I could be all about it. I think we we just motion it and move on.
I mean, the information is all there, but I do think there's things important to get on the record.
Well, you need to rehearse.
Big,
Set the camera.
little, little.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right, let's maybe this up.
Okay, so be real quick. So obviously, you four and the budget committee and folks that pay attention, all of the information from the beginning of the process to now, including the 500-page budget binders available on the town's website, barrington.nh.gov/2022 budget. Throughout this presentation, which is also available on the town's website with links that is links to the direct chapter of where the information in here is. And so the second half of this presentation, a little bit more than half, is just the warrant article language for when the board's ready to make recommendations. So the board recognize Barrington's population is growing 8.7% from the 2010 census. As we previously discussed at the beginning of the budget process, the average household income over 115,000, relatively low poverty rate, median age at almost 40, and rate of home ownership is 91.2%.
Budget expenses grow more than our population.
Well, so now let's look at this, and I think that's an important point. So I told you I was going to do this when our tax rate was set. An analysis of our tax rate, more importantly at the municipal tax rate compared to the other 234 communities in the state. And so this is the result of some of that data analysis. And so you see the sources are down there at the bottom for the tax rate and the population and area data. So by population at 9,326, Barrington is bigger than 87% of the 234 municipalities in the state. So by that measure, Barrington's big, 87 percentile. By land area of 47 square miles, with another square mile of water, a total of 48, 81st percentile. Again, large by that measure. By total valuation, with the 20% increase we saw in 2021, we're at 1.39 billion, which is the 84th percentile. Again, rather large. So here's those three: population, land area, valuation, 81st to 87th percentile, rather large. By contrast, if you start looking at the tax rate, and specifically the municipal tax rate, the municipal tax rate of $2.95 is the 8th percentile of the 234 other municipalities in the state. So rather small. Additionally, when corrected for population, so of those 9,300 and the other 234 communities in the state, were 7th percentile. When corrected for land area, 7th percentile. When corrected for property value, at the almost 1.4 billion, 14th percentile. And so by those measures, Barrington's small. This is, I think, the most telling metric from this analysis, which takes, when we talk about how the portion of the total tax rate, which is the municipal tax rate, continues to shrink. A few short years ago, it was close to 21% of the total tax rate was the municipal tax rate. In 2021, it's 15%. So at 15%, this is all 234 communities in the state, we're the 4th percentile. There's 8 communities smaller than us, and 5 of them have a population less than 1,000. These are communities that the state police does their law enforcement. They have an all-volunteer fire department. They provide far fewer services than the town of Barrington does. So the 4th percentile means that 96% of the communities in the state have a municipal tax rate that is higher proportion to the total tax rate than 15%. And so again, looking at where we started with population, land area, valuation, and our tax rate, in red, you can see those metrics clearly recognize that Barrington is large. When you look at our tax rate, clearly recognize our tax rate, and specifically our municipal tax rate, is small, which is due in no small part to the hard work of this select board, previous select boards, department heads, and others who have worked to keep it this way and make sure that Barrington provides a high level of service, which we do, at a low impact to the property taxpayers. And so those numbers aren't meant to tell any narrative other than to be an important thing to keep in mind of where Barrington is and where it has been. You know, I think the biggest point that it makes, again, is a reflection of the hard work that everybody has done to keep Barrington an affordable place to live. So people that grew up here can stay here, and people that want to come here can afford to live here and continue to live here. And it's, you know, it's no one effort by select board, department heads, et cetera, but a combination of that effort. So
I would just like to comment on that.
Please.
And it's something that I say in light, I guess, to this board, as well as to the department heads, is speaking from my experience of the last 6 years sitting here, we have worked diligently to make tough decisions in conjunction with the ABC and community members who have provided input, that we don't overgrow the town, which is part of what drives our valuation as high as it is and helps pull that tax rate down to make Barrington a desirable place to live. And not overdoing our service at a rate that's faster than we should is what will continue to bring that tax rate down and that valuation up. But it means not everybody sitting out there gets what they want, whether it's police, fire, highway, whoever, the library, but it means that we do it in a way that is responsible and meaningful, and it means you folks will have to carry that forward and be mindful of that going forward.
okay, so
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
this is it dovetailing into the financial analysis, and specifically when we're talking about property tax rate, the funding sources for local government is a variety of sources, not just property tax. So this is a pie chart you've seen before. There we go. So the town of Barrington collects almost $4 million locally. So that's not through property taxes. That 4 million is everything other than the green wedge on that pie chart there. Excuse me. So what you'll see is 27% of the total offsetting revenue, including property taxes, comes from vehicle registrations, 12% from state and federal aid. This is one that increased significantly this year. It was 8% last year, now it's 12%. And that's because of the what the state legislature did in reallocating meals and rooms tax to communities. We ended up with several $100,000 more in revenue from the state because of the hard work of the legislature and the governor providing support to municipalities. And this is where we experience that. Fees for service is things like the transfer station, ambulance, others, then miscellaneous. So property tax, and this is the first year in recent memory where the portion of revenue that we collect of property tax is now less than 50%. So obviously having a variety of funding sources helps the financial stability of the town, just as it would in public sector. 2022 tax rate, $19.50 per thousand assessed value. $14.44 is education, which is an effective increase of 5%. $2.95, which is the municipal portion of the tax rate. As we discussed, a 0% increase. Value went up 20%, tax rate went down 20%. And the county at $2.22, which is an effective increase of 2%. Again, this is that, this shows the numbers we talked about earlier, 11% to the county, 15% to the town, 74% to education. This is that municipal portion of the tax rate. I told you a few short years ago it was close to 21%, and now it's at 15%. And you can see that trend over the last few years. And that's not to say that the town's budget hasn't grown. The town's budget has grown over those years, but it has grown in a way that is slower than the rate of the county and the school, which results in the proportion of the tax rate steadily decreasing. And again, that's that 15% that puts it in the fourth percentile. Only 8 communities with a smaller proportion of municipal tax rate. This is that tax rate history. It goes farther into history than this, showing a flat or decreasing tax rate. There's a few valuation changes that you'll see in 17, 19, and 21. But if you correct for the value changes, the rate dropped just as much as the values increased, which results in a net zero effective increase in the tax rate. That's what brought us to under $3 a thousand. This is the municipal tax rate history. Those same numbers shown in a line graph here, showing that decline since 2013. And again, at $2.95, not corrected for anything, but there's 92% of communities in the state have a municipal portion of the tax rate more expensive than $2.95. So measures of financial stability, that stable municipal tax rate is number one. Having a stable municipal tax rate allows residents to plan, allows a community to prosper, and that's been an important thing that this select board and prior select boards are focused on. The other piece of that is unassigned fund balance, which this board talks about regularly throughout the year. Currently, we're holding 13.3%, which is 0.8 higher than the midpoint of the range. The select board targets at 12.5. This is the history. Most important pieces of information on this listing of data is that used by town meeting. Each one of those entries shows important investments in the town's infrastructure and capital assets year over year that the select boards have been able to ask the community to consider because the town has been committed to holding a substantial unassigned fund balance. This chart will dissect it briefly. So on the left, you see the dollars that relates to the yellow bars, which is our available unassigned fund balance. The green bars, which is how much we've used of unassigned fund balance each year. And then that line, that orange line, shows the percent of unassigned fund balance we have retained, 12.5% being the midpoint of the range. So going back to 2014, you'll see that the select board and the community have consistently kept the balance of that unassigned fund balance at or above 12.5%, which contributes to Barrington's financial stability. And again, all this information, you see the link down at the bottom. That takes you straight to the chapter on the website of the budget binder, which talks about unassigned fund balance or any other topic that's being discussed. So Barrington uses unassigned fund balance for capital projects. These are made up from unexpended appropriations, which are taxes raised, revenue in excess of projections. It's a cash flow account and funds to be able to use in case of emergency. So now specifically about the budget, obviously this is the culmination of months of work by department heads and others. In 2021, the approved budget was $7,272,353. Their proposed 2022 budget, $7,647,871. $375,518 increase, which is equivalent to 5.16%. But this is the most important footnote to that information, which is based on revenue increases, which we talked about revenue earlier and how much revenue is collected locally. The estimated 2022 tax rate remains $2.95. And even with that budgetary increase, you'll see that the three components which offset the budget increase, the additional revenue that we project to bring in, the reduction in overlay because we don't have a revaluation or any adjustment in assessed values this year, and the continued increase in assessed value that we see in town by new construction and renovations year over year. And so this budget, and I know this is something I'm proud about, I know the select board and budget committee also, this is a budget that's being presented to voters with no estimated tax rate impact. And all of that information, right, the select board all has printed copies of that estimated impact with all the calculations and information. It's also available on the town's website. And that's something, again, a tell of financial stability is a level and stable municipal tax rate. This is how we're able to accomplish that with the budget that's presented to voters this year. So the specific increases in the budget, the vast majority, and you'll see this totals $404,000, which is more than the increase, but we have some offsetting decreases. The vast majority of the increases in the 2022 budget are based on wage and benefit categories. So as you know, the select board authorized the addition of an additional full-time firefighter. The highway working foreman was established in the prior year. The pay plan step increase has both wage and benefit impact. There's a police officer, new police officer in the budget, budgeted at 75%. The select board included a 2.5% cost of living adjustment in the budget. The benefit costs, these are things for increasing insurance costs for New Hampshire retirement. The health benefit cost increases total almost $36,000. And then next year we have 3 elections, whereas in 2021 we only had 1 election. So those additional election wages are in there as well. Displayed graphically, here's your pie chart that shows the breakdown of the components of the wage and benefit impacts on the budget. So there are a few other increases outside of wages and benefits, actually only 2, more than $10,000. Admin contracts, the budget request increase is $25,000. That's primarily for additional IT and cybersecurity monitoring and support. Obviously, this is critically important. The town was in a vulnerable place just a few short years ago, and due in large part to the hard work of the technology committee, our new managed service provider. We're in a much more resilient place. That doesn't mean that we still don't have progress to make, but that progress costs money, and that's part of what this increased budget's for. For the $13,000 in general government buildings communication, that's to make sure that we have redundant internet service providers. It's a little bit misleading because $6,000 of that $13,000 is moved from a reduction in the police because we took it out of the police budget into the general government buildings budget. Now to the decreases, revaluation contracts went down $20,000. We don't have a revaluation next year. The services provided by that contractor are less. Rental lease is down $14,300 with the anticipated opening of the town hall in 2022. Fire EMS contract billing based on reduced intercepts from outside agencies, less of a budget there. General assistance, so this is our welfare caseworker. Through attrition at the town hall, we consolidated the caseworker and human resources administrator position. And by all measures, that's been a successful transition for the new employee in that role. And so that saves us almost $12,000 a year. Before I move on to the other warrant articles, budget specific, select board, I know we've covered this a lot. This is more for benefit for the community to see this information here. We'll have public comment on everything towards the end, but is there any questions on budget before we move on? From the select board. Great. Warrant article. Oh, sorry.
Anything from the ABC?
Great. So warrant articles, we talk about fund balance and the use of fund balance for responsible financial planning and setting money aside for capital projects and otherwise. There's a series of warrant articles that the community is presented with every year. That's what's on this list. Won't belabor it. You'll see how much is requested and what the current balance of that account is. This is the second half of that here. For new warrant articles, we're asking voters to reestablish that non-lapsing $100,000 for paving. That was a very productive process that the select board did for a number of years in a row. You'll remember we took a break from that to spend down the transportation fee capital reserve a little bit, use available funding in that account. So that's why we're starting that back up now with the support of the select board, highway department, and the budget committee. There's a new warrant article request, $25,000 for transfer station recycling center capital reserve, saving for future upgrades to the transfer station to include paving, building upgrades, and make some improvements down there. So that is a total of $726,000 requested to be used from fund balance. And similar to the tax rate impact, using that, if every single one of those articles is approved, the calculations put our unassigned fund balance at just over 12.5%, more specifically about $1,600 over 12.5%. So it's very important to the budget committee, and I know it's very important to the select board to make sure that we maintain that balance. The town has done it consistently year over year, and you know the budget committee and the select board trust voters to make decisions with warrant articles, but you have to plan on everything passing and budget accordingly. So if every single one of those warrant articles passes, the unassigned fund balance maintains that targeted balance of 12.5%. The numbers are up there. It's also in the budget binder. If you have questions, let me know. Two things I want to touch on outside of the budget and warrant articles. First, Article 1 is always going to be the election of officers. This information is available on the town clerk site and the website. There's two positions up for re-election for the select board. One for the trustee of trust funds, one for the cemetery trustees, two for the library trustees, one for the town moderator, and one for the supervisor of the checklist. Filing period is January 19th, January 28th, and that Friday, January 28th, the filing period, the town clerk's office is open only from 3 to 5 p.m. So if you know anybody interested, more information on the town's website. The town is only able to do what we do based on a reliance of citizen volunteers. That's how government works, and especially in New Hampshire, it's a very representative model. And so it requires citizen volunteers to step up to their civic duty. Second item, not having very little to do with the select board, but I think very important for the community to have awareness of and prepare for if they're interested. The zoning amendments being introduced this year. There'll be a separate public hearing tomorrow night by the planning board on each of these proposed zoning amendments. Most of these are brought about, the planning board through as they transact business, they identify outdated portions of the zoning ordinance which are inconsistent with prevailing guidance and other things and other issues that are identified. And so they spent a couple of years since they put a bigger list together of corrections that need to be made. But the strong zoning ordinance relies on regular updates to keep it current with what residents want and what the prevailing guidance is in any area. So the listings here, again, the presentation's available on the website. I won't read through all of them, but there's 14 zoning amendments, including the one petition zoning amendment that is on the warrant. Important to note that there will not be an opportunity to change any of those zoning amendments after tomorrow night's public hearing. And at deliberative session, they will be discussed, but they can't be changed. So they'll be on the ballot and voters will decide when they pull the curtain close.
Is there any question on any of those from the board? Just because being the representative for the select board on the planning board, there are lots of discussions around some of these.
Go to the next slide, please.
Did you have something on this one, George?
I do. Article 14.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
What's the history on that?
So that one was a petitioned warrant article because there's a conflict in the interpretation of the exemption of the wetlands buffers. In a lot that was established and created before 87, 2001, and then doesn't have to follow. It's not considered an improved lot at that point in time, so the buffer doesn't become applicable to it at that point. And then, am I skipping that? You're looking at me like I'm
Close.
screwing that up.
Yeah,
so I
close.
could
So
be.
the planning board,
There was two pieces to it.
Yeah.
It's, is it 97 and 01? I thought there were two.
yes, there's setback. It started, so the town started with a wetland setback requirement on lots in a certain window, and then the wetland buffers, which applies to lots after 2001. But there's certain exemptions in the zoning ordinance as it's written. One particular exemption talks about improved lots that were created by the planning board, not created by the planning board. And so the town has consistently applied that exception to the wetland buffer requirements. And the zoning administrator, myself, and the planning board agreed that it would be beneficial to clarify that language a little bit to make sure that it's clear to everybody who reads it, not just to the people that are interpreting it. So the planning board actually, they ended up landing on a proposed amendment that would change the intent. But then after the petitioned article came in, they pulled their article. So the petitioned warrant article here, what the intention of this is to remove the exemption for lots created after 2001, unimproved lots that from 2001. So essentially a lot that existed prior to 2001. If this article passes, a lot that existed before 2001, which doesn't currently have wetland buffer requirements, would have wetland buffer requirements. And so that's, if the article passes, that would be the intent. And the planning board has not yet voted on a recommendation for that article. They'll do that tomorrow night.
And when you start getting into all the nuances tied to that, Connor said it far more eloquently than I could, and I need my planning book in front of me to be able to articulate it the same way. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This doesn't answer all my questions, but I'll accept it. Thank you.
I guess what's the question?
The question is,
Because you didn't, your question around it was, can you talk a bit about it, but you didn't specify if there's something more specific you want to.
what's the exception they're going to remove? They're removing the distance from the building to the wetlands?
Well, there is no setback distance in the current exemption. That's what this then puts in place.
That's, yeah, now you answered my question. Thank you.
Dan, you had something?
No, that covers it. Thank you.
Dan, did you have a question?
Yes,
Dan?
being a member on the conservation, we try getting meeting together before the holidays, but they're very interested in this,
Mhm.
and it needs more work, and they're looking into it, and the planning department, they're gonna do more work on it this year.
Mhm.
So what they compromise, still these times where there's a joint adventure, my understanding, there's some specialists in this year, trying to figure it out.
The Conservation Commission chair was at the most recent planning board meeting, and he shared his support for a more in-depth review and analysis. And one of the things that was discussed at the planning board and from the Conservation Commission chair is wetland buffers aren't a one-size-fits-all. And so, it'd be great if the ordinance could be written in such a way that protects the more valuable wetlands and allows building, you know, allows the buffer to be variable. But again, that requires specialists like you're talking about. So I think there's a big appetite from the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board to do a more thorough review for an update to that whole provision of the zoning ordinance, hopefully next year.
Danny, do you have a question on one of the other?
Could you do the other? Thought I did, but I don't think I do. I'm sorry. Well,
No, that's okay. Just generally, like, it is with Articles 2, 3, and 4, that's just cleaning up some of the regional commercial and residential components. I think the other item that garnered a fair amount of conversation was our Article 13 around multifamily size in the village district. And a lot of that discussion was around, if you look at a couple of the projects that have been approved lately that do not align with the character and intent of the village district, in the sense that they're purely these big residential blobs that don't fit with Barrington. So by changing the multifamily size from 10,000 to 40,000 square feet in the village, it dramatically decreases the size and scale that you would see with some of these developments coming in there. And the only way they would be able to get the residential capacity is with the mixed use piece by having a commercial component to it, which drives the intent and the function of a village district where you have commercial on the bottom floors and then residential up above it.
That's good. Good question.
So again, if it's of particular interest to anybody here or listening at home, the planning board will be holding their only planned public hearing tomorrow night. No, their second. They already held
Second.
Second, and hopefully last hearing for the zoning amendment. So the only last thing I wanted to make sure draw the board's attention to is the documents. All the whole bunch documents have a home for your budget. So most of this is just an update of the information that was presented with the finalized budget packet. You have a copy of my printed copy of my presentation, which I saw some of you referencing. It's the couple important documents is that impact on the tax rate and then the impact on the unassigned fund balance, which are important documents. And my recommendation would be that the select board get through any additional comments they have open for public comment, so we can address any of those and then move into making a recommendation vote on each article. You ready?
So any other questions or comments from the board on the budget or the warrant finalization? Select person Bailey.
Thank you very much. I just think that notice to, by that I mean, it should be stated about the letter that we received from the ABC on their approval, or are we just going to use that for our next year? I want to do it, but I just think they should get some information with the letter that they wrote. Show us what they approved to.
I don't know if I have that letter.
Yeah, so that's the minutes are all in the budget binder. The last select board meeting, the select board reviewed that letter, the final report from the budget committee. And the budget committee will meet tomorrow to make their recommendation votes, pending any changes, which as of yet there haven't been any, on the warrant that we presented at deliberative session.
I just wanted to make sure that it was for that and also the amount of work that they put in, like you had said earlier, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yep. So hearing no changes to the budget finalization from the board, does the ABC have anything they would like to address before we vote? All right. With that, I'll close our piece of this and open the public comment section for the budget and warrant finalization. Does anybody have anything they would like to comment on?
And if there's anybody participating virtual that would like to make a comment, you can raise your hand or using the feature. You have to press *6 to unmute yourself. Speak up if you recognize when you are. State your name, your address. And that's *6 if you're on your phone, you'd like to unmute yourself. In the audience.
Give it 10 more seconds.
Sounds fair.
Right, then I will close public comment for the budget and warrant finalization. At this time, is there a motion to approve the budget at 7.647871 million?
So move.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
That'll be recorded on the warrant as is recommended by a vote of 4-0.
And then warrant articles, do you need us to go warrant
Yes.
article by warrant?
No win.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the operating budget.
We just did that one.
Sorry. Looking for a motion to approve the Article 16 Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
That'll be recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 17 Highway Equipment Capital Reserve.
Second.
Patrick, aye.
Haley,
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Be recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve paving and related work in a non-elapsing article, Article 18.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Be recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve police equipment capital reserve,
So moved.
18. Second.
Second.
I was seconding.
Okay.
That's fine.
Keep it consistent. It's easier for them.
Yep. Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 20, the fire truck capital reserve.
So move.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Article 21, looking for a motion to approve the emergency communication upgrades capital reserve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 22, transfer station and recycling center capital reserve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 23, dam repair, engineering replacement capital reserve.
Move that.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 24, library and community center capital reserve.
I thought that was 25. but we used to-
Last meeting, it was made to 20.
So moved.
I'll second.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sorry.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 25, cemetery capital reserve.
So moved.
Second.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 26, tricentennial celebration expendable trust. Motioned by Select Person Sakosha, second by myself. Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 27, Fire Rescue Equipment Capital Reserve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Aye.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 28, Library Technology Capital Reserve.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Aye.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 29, Service-Connected Total Disability Credit.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 5-0.
Article 30, looking for a motion to approve Article 30, Fire and Ambulance Services Revolving Fund.
Second.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
And just for the community's benefit, we didn't discuss these articles in detail because there's no funding attached. This article, or the previous Article 29, increases the credit amount for the total connected service disability credit offered to those residents that are eligible. This article changes the purpose minorly of the fire current ambulance services revolving fund to add fire. This is a change that the legislature adopted a couple of years ago, but requires local adoption as well. It expands the functional use, recognizing that most fire departments and ambulance services are attached at the hip, as is ours. So it makes it easier to use those funds without worrying, is this an ambulance expense or a fire expense? And that was recommended 5-0.
Looking for a motion to approve Article 31, Cemetery Maintenance and Expansion Expendable Trust Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye. And this,
I would, yep. So this one eliminates the need for continued use of Article 25, which is the Cemetery Capital Reserve, which makes it so automatically every year the revenue we collect for cemetery lot sales goes into expendable trust fund. Currently, we collect the revenue and then present an article to the voters asking to put that into a capital reserve. This just makes it automatic, so we'll have one fewer article each year at town meeting. That's recommended 5-0.
looking for a motion to approve Article 32, selling tax deeded the Homestead subdivision.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Yeah, present.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Nap aye.
Recommended 4-0. This is a failed subdivision down in the, I guess, southwest portion of Barrington, just over the Nottingham border. There's almost 50 acres, 23 lots. It's a mess. The town has a lot of information on its website about the project and what we're looking for. If anybody knows developers that are looking to develop some property in Barrington, send them to the town's website, give them my contact information. We'll be re-advertising a request for proposals to sell this land to a developer that's willing to rectify the issues that exist and turn the land into productive land for the neighbors and the residents of Barrington. Recommend, like I said, 4-0.
And then looking for a motion for Article 33. It's a petition, all veterans tax credit. We drafted an amendment to be introduced at the deliberative session, but we need to vote on it as it's currently written. And I encourage you to vote based on the language as it exists now. So if you support the language as it exists now, I would encourage you to vote to recommend it. If you prefer to see it changed at deliberative session to what we talked about and what the primary petitioner agreed was a reasonable path forward, I'd encourage you to consider not recommending this article to support the efforts to introduce an amendment at deliberative session. And just to point out, I believe the petitioned article is looking for the full funding of the all veterans tax credit, where our recommendation was incremental funding to get there over a 4-year period.
And this is what that amendment would look like.
Select Person Bailey.
Yes, it be noted that through discussions last year, this year, that's the way everybody had agreed to incremental monies to be spent on years to come. So it won't be one big hit. Has been discussed quite a bit.
So Keep that in mind as you're voting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Yeah, President.
Check no?
Haley, aye.
Sakosha,
Nap, no.
Okay, so it will not be recommended by a vote of 2-2.
Sorry, I'm just making notes.
Yeah, no, sir. And is it still the select board's intention, given, I guess, the split vote, is it still the select board's intention to present an amendment? Would you like me to have that prepared, and to be presented by the select board at deliberative session? Or would you prefer to have the floor handle the article as they would all others?
I believe the intent, since we have talked to the petitioners, to present the amendment and then garner support. And then at that point, we would vote on it in support of it as amended, because that accomplishes what we had agreed to in prior years.
Okay. I'm seeing heads nod all the way down.
So,
Okay.
so we're going to present it at the deliberative session. Discussion.
I'll have an amendment prepared for one of the select board members to introduce on the floor deliberative session.
Chairman, I'm in favor of that.
Thank you. So here's my contact information. If anybody is asking, board members, budget committee members, anybody's being asked questions and you don't know the answer, don't hesitate to send them my way. Happy to talk to anybody about what's being presented for their consideration in March. And there's also, as we've discussed, a wealth of information available on the town's website at barrington.nh.gov/2022 budget.
Okay. Moving on, consent agenda, which has a whole bunch of items from a prior meeting because we didn't have unanimous approval.
Because somebody voted no.
Hey.
Minutes reflect who voted no, and I think it was probably in tongue in cheek.
That's okay. I didn't catch it at that, thinking about the unanimous approval point of a consent agenda, and we should have pulled that item off the consent agenda, or should have just at that point gone through the consent agenda, but here's where we're at.
Yep.
Oh,
So are there,
just a question,
yes,
please. Since I was not here at the last meeting, I could not vote for the approving of the minutes since I wasn't present. Is that correct?
That's your choice. You don't have to abstain because you weren't at the meeting. You honestly,
Just that one thing that
Yeah. If you prefer not to vote on approving the minutes, you could request to have those removed from the consent agenda and we consider that separately.
I prefer that.
Great.
The rest of the consent agenda,
So I'd recommend considering the minutes first, a motion to approve the minutes and then the remainder of the consent agenda.
okay. So do we have a motion to approve? Sorry. Select person.
I have one question to ask. Under C, it says previously submitted signed request for signature.
Yes, because all of that is tied to the previously voted on no vote on the consent agenda, which made the entire prior consent agenda invalid because we didn't have unanimous consent.
Thank you. That's all I need to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Are there items that folks would like to remove from the consent agenda since we have the December 6th meeting minutes?
make a motion to approve those.
Hold on, I just want to make sure I have them all. Are there any other items that folks want to remove from the consent agenda? Select person there.
I wasn't at last meeting either, so I really can't vote on everything else I can.
Okay. So I'm removing the December 6 meeting minutes. And right now at this time, looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 6th.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 6th.
I'll second that motion.
Haley, aye.
Sakosha,
and check recuse.
There did say aye.
On the 6th,
The 6th.
the meeting minutes.
Which ones did you say we didn't want to vote on? That was the last meeting.
December 6th. So do you want to? No.
Which one I missed?
You came, you were present, in attendance, chairperson, select person there.
Never one after that?
When you went there?
I thought,
So we'll let your
We
vote.
canceled the 23rd, the meeting
The
for
13th.
13th.
I thought I missed one.
So the minutes will be recorded by a vote of approval, 4 in favor, 1 abstention.
Yes. The rest of the consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda as amended.
Roll call vote.
There I am.
Nantrick, aye.
Taylor,
Sakosha.
Nap aye. Appointments. Everyone should have appointment-related items. Scott Ramsey for the Recreation Commission and David Johnson as a Recreation Commission alternate. I don't know if either gentleman is here and would like to speak to the board.
I believe so. Both of them have attended a Recreation Commission meeting, and the Recreation Commission voted to recommend the appointment of both of them. One would be an alternate for now until one member doesn't plan to seek reappointment in March. Again, it's just for discussion tonight, but happy to ask any questions that the board may have that are unanswered to bring forward to the next meeting on the 24th.
Well, if the board feels comfortable, can
We decided at the last one we weren't going to do that because it
we?
voids the whole point of bringing it before the board and then moving forward. Staff reports. Administrator McIver.
Thank you. So I have a short list of January work anniversaries. Here we are, the first meeting in January. So Tyler Rand in the fire department for 13 years, Cody Guile in the fire department for 5 years. Amy Doherty, our finance administrator, was hired 3 years ago this month. Aaron O'Day, the recreation administrative assistant, was hired this month. A little smaller there, that's 2 years. Last year was a year, and when you copy and paste, Microsoft Word doesn't automatically plural. So thank you for the continued tenure of those employees. Thank you. Go ahead.
Old business. Class 6, oh, I'm sorry, Municipal Office Administrator Cottle.
2022.
When I can get into my email again, I can go in and approve this.
I think we have.
Oh, I wouldn't know because I can't get into my email that tells me I know.
And just, I know I touched base one time earlier in the summer, but we've been attaching the TD card corporate statement to the manifest where the TD card's been being paid. And so we've been doing that for a while. Nobody has commented otherwise. So I'm assuming that that's an effective means for transparency of that TD card statement listing the.
It raised some questions early on, but we also addressed those questions.
Hey, that's what we're here for. File that under asked and answered then.
Yep. Class 6 and private road agreement policy update.
So maybe I'll give.
I have legal. Board decision.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I'll give a brief introduction, how we got to here, and then I know the fire chief's interested more in discussing the topic with the board. Is that amenable to you, Mr. Chair?
It's amenable.
Fantastic. So through RSA 674-41, the select board has the exclusive authority to authorize the issuance of building permits on class 6 and private roads. This is by state statute. If you have proper frontage on a class 5 road or better, you have a right in state statute to build. Your right to build on a class with frontage on a class 6 or private road is at the discretion of the select board. This select board, years ago, and the select person Bailey was here at the time, made the wise decision to establish a policy surrounding the issue and authorizing the issuance of building permits on class 6 private roads. And the whole purpose of the policy, as copied in my town administrator report and included in the policy, is to ensure emergency access to these properties. Reason being, the standards for class 6 and private roads are frequently substandard. And there's very little the town has an opportunity to do about substandard development of class 6 and private roads. And generally, it's not a problem because, the town isn't regularly trying to go to people's residence. Unfortunately, oil trucks are regularly trying to go to their residence. Amazon delivery trucks are, but that's largely the problem of the property owner. Where it becomes the town's problem is when the town needs to respond in an emergency to these properties on substandard roads. And we end up in situations where an ambulance or a fire truck gets in somewhere and can't get out because the road isn't properly maintained. We have to send the highway department onto a private road or a class 6 road to sand or plow or try to help get them out. And so the town has very limited ability to make improvements to class 6 and private roads because we can't spend any money for private purpose, which includes class 6 and private roads. But the select board, and as is common throughout the state, the select board exercises its authority with RSA 674-41 to facilitate incremental improvements to class 6 and private roads by taking a property owner that comes forward and says, I'd like to build on X class 6 or private road. And the select board says, okay, if you'd like to do that, this road's substandard and we'd like to see these improvements made so that the emergency access is improved. By many measures, this has been a productive means to facilitate improvements to roads like Bear River Road, Longshores Drive. In other situations, the select board has made it clear that we're not going to issue any permit on this road or this section of this road until it's brought up to this standard because it's in such poor condition. A good example of that is the class 6 portion of Swain Road. Another example of that is Castle Rock Road beyond the steep grade descent into properties back there. And so the select board has the authority to do that through 674-41. Previous select board established this class 6 and private road agreement policy in order to establish some level of regularity to how the select board is going to review it. It calls for sending letters to the abutters. It calls for a review by the planning board, which is also in statute. And it requires property owners to sign a waiver saying that they recognize that emergency response might have a difficult time getting to their property and they're waiving that liability associated. So the class 6 and private road agreement policy has largely worked for its originally intended purpose, but there's always room for improvement. And this review process started by a review of the fire code. And the fire code discusses fire access very clearly, indicating what's required for proper fire access. That talks about 20 feet wide. It talks about 13 feet, 6 inches here. 13 feet, 6 inches unobstructed in height. And it says, that this is what it takes so you can have a fire truck coming and a fire truck going and you have good fire access. And so in New Hampshire, the fire code is nuanced as the applicability relates to single family dwellings because of how the legislature adopted it. And so it's much as clear as the fire code is, it's much less clear how applicable that provision and other provisions of the fire code are to single family dwellings, which leaves the authority strictly with the select board through RSA 674-41 to determine what access and access specifications you'd like to require residents to adhere to for new construction on class 6 and private roads. So the fire chief has prepared, and you have a copy of it here, recommended changes to the existing class 6 and private road agreement, which pretty simply focus the changes focus on having the town's class 6 and private road agreement policy specifications match fire code specifications. The 20 feet wide travelable surface and the 13 feet 6 inches high. The other thing that it does is formalizes the waiver process. So right now, the select board has a policy that allows waivers of the 16 foot width. A perfect example of when waivers are regularly issued is Bear River Road and Longshore Drive. That road can't be 16 feet wide because it's not laid out to 16 feet wide. The select board has, with the input from the highway department, fire department, planning board, authorized the issuance of building permits on Bear River Road and Longshore Drive and waive the requirement that it be 16 feet. That waiver process has been pretty informal. It's just kind of been, hey, we recognize the constraints and we're waiving this portion of the requirement. What the fire chief is proposing is formalizing that process better so that the select board can look at a resident on Bear River Road and a resident on, Orchard Hill Road or another class 6 or private road and say, this is why the situation is different. This property owner requested a waiver for these particular purposes and proposed these specific alternatives, and that's why we approved it. And so in your case, on your road, you have to present to us the constraints that exist for you meeting this specification and any alternatives that you're willing to propose. And so a formalized waiver process is the kind of the second portion of the recommendation. So the select board has halted hearings from November 1st to now. We have a couple waiting in the wings, so I encourage the select board to make a decision on it so we can restart the process, the review process for consideration of the issuance of building permits on class 6 private roads. A little heavier than Cliff Notes review.
I guess my general sense is my position hasn't really changed from where we were at the first go around with this. And I haven't gotten anything that changes that.
Maybe like to give the fire chief an opportunity to
because of the size of the road and it gets attached to their deed.
that already happens. That already happens, and I think what I've heard from the fire chief previously is unfortunately, property owner might be able to do that, but they might have minor children that live there. They might have guests there, and unfortunately, it's for the folks that have to respond, whether it be police, fire, or otherwise. It's to a house that's burnt to the ground, or even worse. It doesn't. Their job is to get there and save people and save people and property. And the one person, when they bought their house, that signed a waiver and said, hey, we know you might not be able to get here, doesn't say anything to the people that just lost their house, or the people that bought their house from that guy, or those people. And so that already exists, but that's not.
I hear you, but that's already attached. This is the problem with any transaction of any piece of real estate, is that folks need to do their due diligence and understand what exactly they're purchasing and what that means. Select Person Mantrek.
I would agree. They need to do due diligence. Due diligence should say that before we can approve this, you need to have these characters. One of the problems, I think, is that our fire department probably will try to put out a fire. They probably will go in to try to save lives, even if the road isn't wide enough. And then we begin to lose fire equipment. We begin to lose firemen. And so I think that we ought to be very clear And if you buy a piece of property, part of your due diligence should say that this is a class 6 road, it's not big enough, you can't build the roads sufficient to support.
The problem you run into here is that you're taking someone else's property potentially to upgrade a road, which you legally do not have any authority to do. Or you're saddling somebody with a burden of now putting in a fire sprinkler system, which is specifically exempted by the legislature. So it means we're going above and beyond the requirements of the legislature. And if we're going to do that, are you doing it for the right reasons? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a safety guy at heart through and through. That's been 20 plus years of my life. But there's also a risk weighing component there too. You look at, like, what is the cost? What is the risk? What is the likelihood of probability? So you do a PFMEA analysis on it and say, okay, where are we at? I mean, I think the bigger contention I have out of this is if you look at current building materials, and you look at, they're not even structural, I'll call them structural beams, but they're not structural beams, like LVLs and other components like that. LVLs are a little bit better in some cases than some things, but you take an LVL, for example. If you look at when they build a house now with them, the burn rate on a house compared to a standard 2x12 is so much faster with a engineered LVL than it is with a standard 2x12, that a house burns and collapses in half the time that it would normally.
Well, then are we then going to make a rule that we require them to build their buildings out of these materials?
I mean, I think that's the piece that you get into, is you can be on a main road and not have any better. You're not actually really solving the real problem potentially.
I see the real problem here that we are solving is making it safer and easier for our emergency personnel to get in and do their jobs without risking their lives, their equipment, to do these things. Because I suspect that if there's a house burning on a skinny road, our fire department will try to get there. Our police will probably try to get there. And if they are endangered, or the equipment that we need for the rest of the building is endangered, I think we have that right. I think we have that responsibility to insist on that.
I don't know if I agree, and that's what I'm saying, is I think that we do the best we can, and we want them to upgrade the roads where applicable by adding material, filling them in, doing their part, which is what historically we have been doing. But I think to go to such an extreme level with an added burden and cost, that I just don't, I can't say that I agree that adding these items is what I kind of where I fall on it.
But we do disagree.
Select person, Haley?
Thank you very much. One of the items that you both have brought up is the safety of public service, vigilance, fire, police. We also have to include that if Mark's group is needed, to call, because I think you can, I don't know if you recall or not, but in the past, this was a problem where some incidences couldn't get in because it wasn't plowed or anything else. And
In 6 years of sitting here, George, I have never had that brought before me.
oh, no, I'm not being in the last 6. I know, I agree with you 100%. But what I'm saying is that there was an incident just down the road from me on 9 where they had to come in, I think it was 8, 9, 10 years ago. Chief can correct me on that, where they had to have the plow so they could get in to provide EMS service to an individual there. But what I'm saying is that what effect with everything we're talking about and what's being requested, what effect is that going to have on the current homeowners? If we approve something like this, now the current homeowners are going to have to outlay money to be up to, and what's going to happen is they're not going to do it. I would say maybe 70% will and the other 30% won't.
What it drives is people making renovations in an underground manner as opposed to doing it to code and approving it with the code enforcement officer.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
Well, except that those people don't have to do it until they rebuild or addition to their building. We are talking about issuing a building permit, not forcing people who are in existence to change the road.
If
Have
you,
approved those.
if you do an upgrade to your building, you are issued a building permit, which now makes you applicable by this. Even though you already have a dwelling that was approved on a class 6 road.
But there is a distinction in the policy. There's section 1 and section 2 upgrades. Section 2 upgrades are the added living space or a new dwelling. Those are the only ones that require a hearing in the review process. The section 1 are interior renovations, garages, sheds, and those are the single ones that one select board member signs and moves on. There's no requirements tied to those. So there is a distinction. It's not all building permits. It's just the ones that add living space that require the full process.
So anyone wants to finish a basement, they want to do living space above a garage, like an accessory dwelling unit, any of those items.
Bonus rooms.
Yep.
Well, this is just a question. If I had my druthers, I would look for somebody to make a motion to suspend building permits for a year till we can have more information. That's my druthers. But it's not, it's how I feel that something like this needs to have a lot more work done to it than we're doing right now. I just, safety issue drives you crazy.
I'm a firm believer that if we're going to amend our policy, that this should be worked out with this from a state end so that the state legislature end with where they have an exemption on single and multifamilies, if there's a, pardon the expression, but a pissing contest on that end, it needs to be fixed there. We can't fix it. We're just the people who get stuck shouldering the burden of actually administering it.
We get to be the south end of a northbound horse.
Well, respectfully, I think what you have is local control, which is something that I don't think we ever really want to give up. I would rather the town be able to make the decision that's right for Barrington than Concord to decide everything that we do. And
I fully agree, but their policy conflicts with itself.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't apply. The fire code doesn't apply. But giving the select board control with RSA 674-41 is not accidental. That authority that the select board has is a very important authority to decide what's right for Barrington. The development on class 6 and private roads in Dover is very different than Barrington. It's 48 square miles and a lot of rural roads and neighborhoods or houses and development. And so I think the select board has a very important duty to consider how they want to control the new dwellings on class 6 and private roads. I think I commend the select board previously for developing the policy. And like I said, I think by most measures it has worked very well in its current form. But it's important to continue to review it. And what you have before you is a recommendation from the fire chief to expand the policy for some additional requirements to ensure public access.
Which I agree. And I think we absolutely in our current policy are doing what we can to try and further improve the roads that we have. But I think of, can't get my camera to work. No, the one up that whoops down around the backside of Mendham's Pond. No, Mendham's Landing, McDaniel Shore.
Or even worse than that is Hemlock.
Right, McDaniel Shore and Hemlock, which I mean, you gotta be a mountain goat to get down the upper part of that. And when you start talking about looking at, a grade where your rise is less than 1 foot over 10 feet, those roads would never meet it.
Well, so I think similar, to that similar extent, the previous select boards have made it clear that if somebody brings in an application for a building permit on the Class 6 section of Swain Road, there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done to improve that road before the select board consider issuing the permit. Similar to what the select board did with Castle Rock Road, with that steep grade going down to the property behind that.
But that was,
And so Hemlock,
I think Castle Rock is a different story.
well, then
Because
just talk about Swain.
because that property came in as a tax deeded property and was peddled out that way with the restriction on it to whoever bought it.
Then
So-
look at Swain Road then.
I mean,
And I
it's
think
not,
Hemlock, my expectation, and I say expectation, what I would anticipate if the select board was presented with a building permit to develop a vacant lot down at the end of Hemlock Lane, my suspicion is that the select board would look at that and say, we can't add another house down here. It's a go path. That be a very challenging place to get in and out of, and adding residents similar to what the select board has said about Swain Road. There was a couple winters in a row where we constantly heard from residents of Swain Road with how poor a condition their road was, and begging the town to do something about it.
and we addressed it directly with them that they are responsible for the maintenance of that road and the town can't touch it.
Right, but the one thing the town can do, which I said when we started here, that the select board holds the keys to people developing their property on Class 6 and private roads.
Mhm.
And so the commitment the select board has made on the Class 6 portion of Swain Road is we're not going to issue anybody a building permit for a new or expanded dwelling unless the road is upgraded. Because that's the one thing the select board can do for the residents down there that live on, by some measures, a substandard road. And so Hemlock might be a similar example, where the select board would say.
So the two points I have related to that is we adjust in their value for the fact that they live on, if you want to call it a substandard road.
We do. So
So
lots on Castle Rock Road beyond the hill are valued at $16,000.
please don't interrupt. I didn't interrupt you.
My apologies.
So we address that in the value of it. We not only address it in the value, but we also make it pretty clear that, like, if somebody wants to come in and build, that they may potentially be saddled with a whole bunch of additional cost on top of the fact that they're charged a building valued, being charged at a tax rate on a buildable lot, that now we're going to come back and say it's buildable-ish, which if that's the case, you better go back and drop the value on these lots, because if they're buildable-ish, the tax rate on them, they should not be taxed as fully buildable lots. They should be taxed as buildable-ish if you go and invest $50,000 into the road or $100,000 or whatever else. Plus saddling everybody else who already has a house on a Class 6 or a private road. And for full transparency, I am one of those people with any additional requirements on that, I think is absurd. And that's my opinion, and I'm allowed to have an opinion. That's what I was voted to sit here for.
I understand your problem. The only point I was making is that we do reduce the value on non-buildable lots.
I
Should be reduced.
We already do that.
should be reduced further if we're going to make it further restrictive to do it.
I think it takes the rights out of the current and future landowners, and it ties them down. I think that, if we go forward or however we move tonight, these are good ideas, and we can recommend, like, hey, we like to see this happen, but not make it to where, somebody wants to build a house and then throw in a $500,000 road on top of it. Who can afford that?
And I think just as it's currently set up in the existing policy, the police, the fire, and the road agent all make a recommendation for what comes before us.
Yep.
Our fire chief can make the recommendation of, do this to upgrade the road. I recommend you add a sprinkler system. They're all recommendations. And it comes before this board to vote on.
We have a strong policy there. All we have to do is to turn around and use it.
Mhm.
That's all.
And that's what I think. What's going on here? We have a policy. It's there for a reason. It's actually already structured in a way that it allows us to address areas of concern and concerned items. It's all in how we utilize it.
So we looking for a motion, or is this just discussion?
Well, it's been discussion. My recommendation is we leave the policy as is and we allow the department heads to make recommendations as they currently have, which allows the board to be able to have a reasonable discussion on anything coming before you. And a perfect example is the gentleman who was looking to build right at the entrance on Lindsay Point Road, where you got a wide open stretch and he's building less than like 200 feet up the road.
It's accessible from another road.
Oh yeah, you've got access 2/3 of the way around that property.
Point of order. We need to get back to the discussion at hand, please.
I think this is contributing to the discussion at
Okay,
hand, and the
all right.
question is there, do we want to make a motion or do we want to leave it as is?
As far as I'm concerned, and you're asking my opinion, leave it as is, because we need to have that authority to say, fix the road. You don't fix the road?
Select person Mantrick.
I would suggest that this actually gives people much clearer that this is our standard. They can apply for a waiver and we can give them waivers if we feel that's necessary. This lays it out for them. So sometimes someone who's going to buy a piece of property here has a 14-foot road path. You can say, here's our standard. You can apply here, or we can say, go ahead, buy it, and guess what our standard is. Guess what our standard is.
My personal take on it is that our standard should not be more restrictive than the state standard. That's what we have zoning for. If you want it, it should be added into the zoning at that point. It doesn't belong, like, our job is to try and help the community grow, thrive, and be successful at the most reasonable rate to the taxpayers possible. Not by adding undue burden that if you like me, you're willing to waive. And that's what when you put a standard in place like that, now it becomes you have to like me enough to waive the standard. It becomes an extra right, not a point of right. And I believe it should remain a point of right. And then if we want to go farther, we look at going farther because it's reasonable. So, person Sakosha?
I recommend leave it as is.
I also agree with that. So if that's a motion, I'll second the motion.
Yep.
Roll call vote then?
Mantrick, no.
Haley, yes.
Sakosha,
Nap aye.
So we'll resume hearings at the January 24th meeting with the existing policy.
And then in reference to make sure our fire chief is aware, if you have recommendations that you think are imperative or important.
Please come up to the microphone.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I can promise you this, we made my job a lot easier, because what you're gonna hear is following the selectmen's policy. The policy is wrong. It's not consistent right now. That's the reason I sat down and tried to do this. So it makes it very easy. I don't have to go look at anything. You guys have your policy in place. Hemlock Lane last year, I had to back that fire truck over a mile out of there because there was no place to turn around. So you guys have your policy.
How does
You don't want to change. No, don't interrupt me now. you have a policy you don't want to change. So my recommendation is follow the selectmen's policy.
So my question is, just as a question, should what we be looking for is that we either acquire a piece of land on there where we could put a turnaround in? Should we be doing something like that?
You should, okay.
That actually makes it so that if we have these roads that we know are challenging, that the town actually owns a parcel where it's designated as nothing more than a place to turn around or a spot where it provides the appropriate access for you to be able to get in and get out in a reasonable and effective manner.
You can't do that because you can't buy property on a private road and you can't use any taxpayer funds to improve that. So it requires you, was the whole idea of this policy, to stand there and tell, there's going to be lots in this town that you have to tell people, no, you can't build there. Because you know what? When you're starting to look at $750,000 to $1 million fire truck, it isn't the police cruiser that we're worried about not getting in there. It isn't the ambulance we're worried about getting in. It's these big trucks. And when the guy at the end of that road has a smoke detector problem, and we have to go in there with that truck and we can't turn around, and you got to back a mile out, that's not reasonable. And so the whole idea behind the changes to this policy, you people do have a right to stand there and tell people the policy, the intended policy of this was, the intention of that policy when it was put together years ago was so that emergency services could get in there. Right now, you have a policy that's all over the board. You guys make decisions based on however the wind's blowing tonight. The road agent and the fire chief and the police chief, we come in and we make recommendations, much like I did with Lindsay Point, and that wasn't reasonable to you. Lindsay Point is a narrow road. When the fire truck's parked in the middle of it, there ain't anybody going by that thing. Nobody. I will go park a fire truck in the middle of that road, Andy, and I will defy you to go by that truck. I'll get on the side of it. I'll defy you to go by without driving on somebody's lawn. You can't do it. So when you can't do it, a fire truck can't pass. The whole idea behind this policy was to make changes so that we can safely get fire trucks in there. But you guys made the decision tonight to stay with your current policy. That makes my job very easy. I'm just going to stand there and say, follow the selectmen's policy. And when we can't get to people's houses because there's no place for us to turn around, it is what it is. Because you guys don't want to interfere with the people that are trying to build a house. You would rather give them whatever they need, not emergency services. That's just what you said tonight. And
That's not at all what I said.
Andy, that's 100% what you said.
That's absolutely not.
Listen to the tape. Listen to what came out of your mouth.
I think
That's okay.
Rick,
I'm talking.
what you just heard me say was what we can do is we actually have the authority to put a warrant together, to put in front of the people, just like we did to acquire the parcel of land that we're building a town hall on, and say that gives us the flexibility to say, hey, if a parcel is available for a reasonable appropriated fund that they would allow the town to purchase that parcel to use for the purpose of vehicle turnaround. And I honestly think you would get full support on that, and that would fly.
You can't do that. And if you go back and listen to the tape, what you said was, I don't want to infringe on the rights of the people that want to build a house out in the middle of the woods. I'd rather infringe on the people that got to go down there and get it. Listen to the tape. Listen what come out of your mouth, Andy. You flat out said you don't want to. You've led this whole conversation. It's all been you that has said this is about protecting the rights of the person who wants to buy a piece of land and not the emergency services that have to get there. So I'm okay with that because I respect the fact that the five of you get to decide how we're going to operate. So it makes my job very easy. follow what Selectman Knapp and the rest of the board want, and we'll go from there.
So I think there's an opportunity with the existing policy to tighten up the waivers that are issued, if it's the select board's intention, because the policy as it's written requires 16 feet. And to the point of turnarounds, unfortunately, there's a very specific statutory prohibition on spending public money for a private purpose, which that's what precludes us from maintaining class 6 or private roads. And that's what would maintain us from buying property on a class 6 or private road, because the only benefit, that doesn't have a benefit to the general public. That only has a benefit to the people that live on a class 6 or private road. So,
But I don't know if I would agree with that, because I think if you looked at it, you could make a pretty good argument that your police and your EMS are providing a public benefit, and they support a public benefit. Even though it's on a private road, it is a public service that's providing that benefit.
I'm happy to give you a specific legal opinion, but this is a question that's been asked and answered throughout the state of New Hampshire for years, because Barrington isn't the only community that has residents on class 6 or private roads that feel disproportionately affected from certain services that they don't receive. And there have been court cases, and it's a question that, as the statutes are written right now, that municipalities have little to no ability outside of a declared emergency by the emergency management director or otherwise to spend money on a class 6, to benefit a class 6 private road, to include buying property, to include we looked at expanding a turnaround for the town forest, wouldn't be able to do that. So there's very strict, but if it's the board's desire to have a specific legal opinion on the question, happy to get it.
I would gladly support doing that, because as we can all see, and I alluded to earlier, the state statute puts us in a position where, yes, as Connor says, it gives us control, but it pits us against our own departments.
And it's not just for new builds, it's also for existing people on there if they want to add. You know, to tell those people like, hey, you know, have this idea, so you've lived there for 20 years, and then go, hey, you know, your idea is doing an in-law apartment above, that's out the window, bud, unless you upgrade this road. I mean, you know, it's not just the new people coming in, it's the existing.
Or go put in a fire sprinkler system that requires thousands of dollars of maintenance to just to maintain it to a current standard, because there are requirements tied to that. Select Person Bailey and Select Person Mantrick, I don't know if you had.
I just gotta say is that legislature has to turn around and hold these private entities that have control of the road and collect from the other people, got to give them some teeth. I have friends that we visit maybe every week
we're there.
It's kind of something.
Yep, I see. Yeah, yeah. Whoop, gone. Okay. Cheryl Huckins, if you would please unmute yourself and provide your commentary.
I guess I'm not gonna get it back.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Andy, I just wanted to say,
Name
I
and
agree with you
address, Cheryl.
completely on your statements that you just made. We had a major fire here off Chapman Drive last summer. There was at least a 4-alarm fire. We had between 6 and 8 fire departments, I believe, here. And no one got stuck. People were able to pass each other fine, and the fire was effectively handled. I think what the fire chief is asking for is overkill. I think it unfairly burdens property owners who already live on the private road. It diminishes the value of property should someone own a piece of land there that they'd like to sell. As far as turnarounds go, well, no matter how wide you make the road, you're not going to be able to make it wide enough for a fire truck to do a U-turn there anyway. So the only option would be to keep some land that we've acquired through tax deeding and perhaps use that land for turnarounds if that's what you want. As far as trucks passing each other, when you have a road like I live on, Chapman Drive, I believe it's 16 feet wide pavement. When a wide vehicle's coming down the road and another one's coming at it, you pull over a little closer to the edge. People are able to pass without an incident. So yes, Andy, I totally agree with you. I think that this proposal is overkill and it's very unfair to the people owning land and living on the road.
Thank you. 16.
And I can't hear you.
Yep. Oh, I was just saying thank you. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but
I can hear you now.
16 feet is definitely wider than some of the roads we've definitely talked about. Chief Walker, I know you had your hand up here for a bit, and I wanted to make sure we covered the territory we have here.
I just want to clarify one point. You're not, the whole idea behind doing this policy was to turn around and say, this is what we're going to do, whatever the measurements are. And if you can't meet this policy, so the idea would be is that you would, at the very beginning of this deal, whether it's the building inspector or the zoning board, not the zoning board, but the building department or the planning department would hand you the document saying, this is what you're going to do if you intend to build on a private road. Here's what you're going to meet. Your due diligence is to meet that. If you can't meet that policy, whatever the 5 you decide that policy is, you would have to come back and ask for a waiver. The waiver request would have to be done in writing, and it would be answered in writing on whether it was approved or not. The idea being is because there is so much inconsistency in this policy. Yes, the road agent, and him and I both agree, it's probably the worst thing in the world that we have to do. And then we come back, we make recommendations and say, do this, do this, do this. And we're at the mercy of the 5 of you agreeing that what we're asked for is okay, or it's too much and you stand there and say no. So we've stood there and looked at the guy that's standing out there on the road with us and said, we want this, 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 and this, and we're going to recommend all this stuff. They come in and you guys say no, who looks like the pots? We do. So the whole idea behind looking at this, and I can tell you the research I've done in the past summer, it's all over the board. There are some communities that flat out tell you, we're not going to allow anybody to build on a class 6 or private road. All I'm asking for you to do is to develop a policy. I don't agree with that policy. I don't think it's enough based on the vehicles that we have to use today. I respectfully disagree with Cheryl Huckins. She's 100% wrong. Chapman Drive was turned into a one-way road because we couldn't pass fire trucks in there, and that fire didn't get taken care of the way she said it did. But that's beside the point. The whole idea is that at 2 o'clock in the morning, none of the 5 of you are standing there next to me trying to figure out how I'm getting a fire truck in or out of someplace. None of you are doing that. If nobody complains to the five of you about the fire truck couldn't get to my house, or the ambulance couldn't get to my house, or the police cruiser couldn't get to my house, then you guys don't know there's a problem. But my people and myself, those of us that do, and we will bend over backwards trying to get to the people, because it's what we need to do. But when you're taking a $750,000 fire truck that I help pay for as a taxpayer, and I mire that thing in the mud and can't get to your house, and nobody can get by me until that thing gets pulled out, now we got a problem.
There's how many times does that happen?
Thankfully, not very often, but you know, if it happens once, it's one time too many. And all I'm saying is that you need to be in a position, you should never expect the fire truck to have to back a mile out of hemlock. You know what? I can't fix that. What's there is there.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You can stand there and say that if you want to build further down in hemlock, if you look at the policy that's put in place, is that you're going to make your driveway wide enough so the fire truck can use your driveway to turn around in. And you know what? Anybody else on that street or wherever it is. And that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. And to stand there and say that you're putting an undue burden on people that are already living, that's 100% false. But because our policy says, if I want to build 3/4 of a mile past your house, then I got to upgrade the road to where my house is. So the road becomes upgraded all to where my house is, not past my house, but the road becomes better. So you get better service because of me building the thing. But you need to have a policy. If you don't change anything else, you know what? It is what it is. But you need to have a policy that says this is what you got to meet, whatever that is. And if you can't meet this, you have to request a waiver in writing.
What you just asked for is different than what's here on paper. And why I say that is what you just asked for was the ability to turn a fire truck around in their driveway. So requesting that their driveway is built to a standard that allows them to turn a truck around is very different than this.
You've got a guy, you're going to have one coming forward that wants to build a house down the end of that. If there's no place to turn a fire truck around all the way on the end of that, we have to back all the way out of Gillette.
We need more side by sides.
And Andy, the turnaround is a component, the fourth bullet. And I think what I heard from the fire chief through this process over the last couple of months is that it's important to have a standard.
That's
and
not
consider
what's
waivers.
here on the fourth bullet.
Having turnaround 250 feet.
Yeah. That, any
Well, the only
dead end
place they'd
road
be
more
able
than, any dead end road more than 250 feet long shall have a turnaround constructed capable of turning the town's largest fire apparatus around year round. Dedicated turnaround shall be clearly marked as such with proper signage of no parking. What the comment was that their driveway should be constructed in a way that I can back a truck into it and turn it around and drive it out. That is not what's bulleted here in point 4. Not even close. That's a driveway, and what's bulleted here are very different items.
But if you can't have the places down on Berry River Long Shore, you would never be able to take in with the size of lot, you're not going to be able to use a driveway. The point of over 250 feet long is that it's about 350 feet from Route 9 to the tree line along the edge of the public safety building. And that's where I came up with the 250 foot mark, is to get an idea. You know, it's anytime you're backing a fire truck up, you're using a spotter, and you're risking the chance that there can be a problem. Somebody can back into something, somebody can get hurt. So the idea is that, you know, if you're building 250 feet in, that's not a big deal, but it gave the town a benchmark to say, okay, your driveway is going to be longer than 250 feet, and there needs to be a turnaround. There's a 2-lot subdivision on Sloper Road. That driveway is 0.6 of a mile long.
Right, but it was also constructed to a better standard than half the roads in town.
Really? It's 13 feet wide. And there's no place to turn around in there, and there's no requirement to make a turnaround. So when the guy builds his house and decides that he doesn't want to put a turnaround in there, and we have to get down in there, you could be forced to back up 0.6 of a mile. If you didn't get down there and look at that, don't necessarily take for his word, because it's not as wide as he said it is. That's not the point. The point is
But that will be caught in the building part.
no,
That was how it was approved.
no.
It came before the planning board that way.
The planning board approved it. It's a
I know,
subdivision.
on it.
There are no teeth for you guys or us to require a safe turnaround for a fire truck on it.
But it's approved based on the information provided on the road, that it was all done with number 6 processed
By
gravel.
the developer, you took the developer's word for it.
But that can all be verified with the road widths and everything else.
Driveway.
Or the driveway widths.
You don't, my point is that that's a piece that needs to get fixed. You can't let somebody build a driveway 0.6 of a mile long and not have adequate places for people to turn around. It's over with. That can't be fixed. But
It can, because there's a building permit component to it as well.
Those are on a class 5 road though. They're just gonna be issued. But I think not to distract from the conversation.
I think we're
The fire chief's gonna work with the planning board to update regulations, subdivision site review regulations, to encourage him to consider his perspective on things like this subdivision.
I mean, like, we've already voted on it. I feel like we're
well, I just
shooting the dead horse at this point.
hearing you guys sit up here and talk about stuff, some of the stuff you're talking about is absolutely, some of the comments you're making are exact 100% false. And so in fairness, let's just make sure that we got all the facts out.
What have I stated that's been false? Because I don't think anything I've said is false.
I'm talking about the comments that have been said that the board said, well, this affects everybody who lives on the road. It doesn't.
It does if you want to upgrade, if you want to do something to your house.
Not as an AD. Look at your own policy. Your policy does affects everybody.
What it says is that the permitting becomes different once on anything 400 square feet or larger. And every ADU is approved at larger than 400 square feet.
If it's already in there like it was on Union Lake Road, there was no comments to be made. That space was there. They turned it into an ADU. It was already built. There was no addition made. I'm talking about using your own policy. Read your own policy. There's certain things that trigger us to look at it, and there's certain things that don't. And then making the comment 1 foot and 20. The 1 foot and 20 is the grade coming off the road, so that you're not coming off and going straight up like this and hanging the back end of a fire truck up in the middle of the thing. It doesn't say anything about the steepness of the driveway.
But if it's coming off the road, then why did we make the upgrade to, what's it called? The one that Select Person Air purchased, Castle Rock.
I like to make public.
It's not open for public comment.
Do you allow there?
I'm not allowing public comment. I allowed a member of the ZBA with the permission of the board. It is not open for public comment.
When you're looking at Castle Rock Road, it's exactly like you said. I stood here and argued up and down and that road was not safe. That was one road right there at the top of that hill before that road was repaired, where I stood there and said, there's certain times of the year we will not pitch the hill on a fire truck. We absolutely will not do it, because there's a strong possibility that with the way the road was taken care of, that we were going to end up in the swamp and the truck would be upside down. That was the decision I made as a fire truck.
And that was a decision that you
I
presented to the
But
board.
I argued successfully to the board to say, do not sell that property. Leave it as tax deeded property unless you put a caveat that says the road will be fixed.
Which we did.
And you did, but
Yep.
that doesn't have an effect on you buying a single lot off Beauty Hill Road and having to come in off the road. And if that driveway if the elevation changes 600 feet and you're going up a hill, that's totally different than what Castle Rock was.
I don't know if I would agree, because sitting on the planning board, I can't tell you how many times it's come before me where I've seen builders, developers have to show that they can get a slope to get an ambulance or a truck up the driveway. And right down here on one that they built into the side of the gully, I can't think of the name of it, literally right down the street here.
You're both right.
It's the
Different
same
things,
thing.
though, because
Right,
you're
but
talking
it's-
subdivision.
Not even a subdivision. This was a lot built in a subdivision. It was a
Yeah.
built out lot, and to get the permit for a house, it sat before the planning board and they had to present a slope for a driveway to get an EMS truck up,
So, well, no, it's for a fire truck.
fire truck.
Wouldn't run the tailboard into
Yep.
the pavement and get stuck.
Right, but that's a driveway. I mean, which contradicts exactly what you're saying. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. We've all made valid points. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think it's well worth the board addressing it and listening to it. And you get to make that argument in front of the board, just like everybody else would.
I agree.
So, select person Manshek. He's been waiting patiently.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. Go ahead. I won't.
Two comments. One, the state gave us the ability to decide what we want for our town.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we should sit here and say, wait till the state makes definitive remarks. I think they've told us you can do what you need to do, what you want to do for your community. Kind of appreciate that. We also, I think, there are a couple things. Every lot in this town doesn't need to have a house on it. And if it endangers people or makes it impossible for our emergency service to do their job, maybe that lot does not need a house on it. If we have a policy like this, then the realtors who try to sell this property either have to lie to the people or they have to reveal that you can't get a road down here or you can't get building here until you build a new road, which would discourage people, but that's okay because not every lot needs a house. And I think we owe it to make clear policy so that they can work off of that rather than saying, let me guess what your policy is going to be. We have a policy. Here's why I want a waiver. I think it's reasonable. If we want people to develop all these lots, I think there's a way that we can make those class 5 roads. We can take the responsibility and we can pay for that as a community. It's very expensive, but if we think that's going to open up more development here, if we need more houses on these lots.
Well, that's exactly.
Policy
Mhm.
that everybody's asking us to do again, but we have to sit down and say, this is the policy, this is what we're going to do, and we should do it. Right now, we've been arguing over whether the applicant proposes to physically bring the relevant portion of the road, class 6 or private road to standards. That's the standards we have already in here. We put the standards in here.
Right.
You go on and it says, any recommendations provided as a result of the planning board review has to come in here.
Yep.
Now, we go down to the road to improvement. Before, this is the key thing I want to make for everybody here to hear. Before beginning any work within the limits of the class 6 road, the applicant must receive a written permit from the Board of Selectmen pursuant to 236, semicolon 911. I can't even turn the page. And shall be subject to the penalties provided by under this other RSA 2 or failure to secure or comply with the items said page. It states in here that the standards have to be met for the road. And I'm guilty, I'll say this right now, for
Me too. We've
for
all waived
waiving
them.
some of the waivers. Giving waivers and saying it. The road shall have a 16-foot travel service with a 2-foot shoulder on either side. That's 20 feet, but it's only 16 feet of travel way. If we hold her to the fire, then we can turn around and get it taken care of. We've already voted not to move forward with this, but we need to talk about the fact that the policy is here and we, the 5 of us, have to sit here and say, this is it. And the planning board, same time, has to look at the policy that's there, say, this is what you can do and can't do. At the same time, the ZBA has to look at it and say, well, this house doesn't fit, it isn't close. So everybody understands that we have a policy which to maintain. It's here because some people that sat here sat with me and argued years ago. And we put everything here.
I agree. It's all in the policy, George.
It is, and it's just, it's like the politics to now, if I can talk about other stuff. Everybody talks about.
Point of order.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I'm all done.
We're just
No, here,
getting.
point of order is perfectly, I was gonna go off on a rant.
Yep.
I'm not
So-
gonna do it.
I absolutely agree, and thank you for pointing out that it is there in the policy and the policy presents it. It is our job as a board to uphold the policy. If we're not gonna uphold the policy and we're gonna waver from the policy, then that's where the recommendations of our police chief, our road agent, and fire department become imperative to say, here's how you can accomplish what you want to. So, thank you for pointing out the policy. I do appreciate that.
Productive resolution.
It was long and timely, but I do appreciate all the spirited discussion. This is what makes local government work as messy as it can be. But it really is what helps drive the fact that we have a policy. The policy's there. We've just not upheld ourselves to the policy. So, thank you. Select Person Air, would you like to rejoin the board?
Yes, I would.
Thank you very much.
9 people.
Woo! Barrington, local repeater.
Okay, so, at the May 24th meeting, select board authorized the acceptance of the radio communications study provided by Communication Design Consulting Group. It's a Barrington resident offering his services for free. Norm Boucher, tremendously generous of him. He has decades of experience and expertise in just the area that we need. He's offering the services to the town for free. The town is forever indebted to his volunteer service. He's helped us a lot. On October 4th, we advertised, the select board decided to advertise the specifications for a new repeater and radios for the Barrington local frequency, which would be used for the Department of Public Works, and to replace the fire repeater with a plan to use the funds which are already available in the properly established capital reserve. After review by the town's communication consultant, we recommend awarding the project with a proposed contract price of $74,125.85. You'll remember at the October 4th meeting, we anticipated about $80,000. There will be some ancillary costs. We'll pay an electrician to run some wiring to where we add the repeater and some of the other equipment. So we still think that 80,000 number is good. All of the bid specification and the responses on the town's website. You've got a link in there. We're still working to finalize the additional frequencies that we'll need. So there might be some minor adjustment to that proposal itself. Some of the equipment is frequency dependent. And so depending on what frequencies we choose will depend on what equipment we need. Price might vary a little bit. So I'm looking for a decision from the select board tonight to make a motion to award the project to Allcom and authorize up to the 80,000 to be spent from the emergency communication upgrade capital reserve, which is previously established.
I just have one question, just because I don't remember from discussion when we had on it earlier. Will this local repeater be applicable when the regional system gets upgraded? Will it become a backup or a functional use secondary repeater for not Durham EMS, but
Yep. So no, the answer to your question is no. What this will serve as a backup for, though, is police. So this Barrington local frequency is actually licensed to the police department. The problem is it's all just radio to radio. There's no supporting infrastructure. The highway department has used this frequency. They have mobiles in all of their trucks. The problem is you can't get very far in a community like Barrington, 48 square miles, and the terrain that we have, radio to radio. So you really need a repeater. So what it will do is it will provide that communication for the highway department, and it will be the backup or tactical frequency for the police department who relies on Stratford County. So there isn't any planned overlap with the Barrington local repeater with fire and EMS, which that's communication dispatches, UNH, McGregor, right, Barrington, Lee, and Madbury. But replacing that repeater will make improvements and will actually save some money by replacing that repeater with the fiber connection that the board previously approved. Good question.
Select person Sakosha.
Make a motion to award the Barrington local repeater and radios and fire EMS repeater scope to Allcom and authorize up to $80,000 to be spent from the emergency communications upgrades capital reserve on the project.
Second.
Roll call vote. Nope. Sorry, select person there.
That all procedure, well,
Yes. Well, we advertise the specification.
There were only, I think, 2 that provided bids on it, wasn't it?
Yes. There's just not a lot of radio shops.
Yeah. Trying to find, I can tell you, I have local communication that we utilize through our buildings, even to the standpoint where that was one of the items talked about, was it possible to piggyback on to a manufacturing building in the area for that, and we just were not the right system for it, and it didn't fit well.
I just want to clarify, we dotted all i's, we're all set?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
There, I.
Patrick, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Sakosha.
Napa. The Homestead Development.
So this is very brief. I amended the warrant article. We didn't dive into it. Our original intention was to present a warrant article which identified the developer and the purchase price. We did a lot of work for the last year and the end of the year, advertising, request for proposals. Talked to a lot of developers who were interested. So I followed up with 5 of them after the proposal window closed. And I asked them, hey, what happened? Thought you were interested. Thought you were going to fund this. The 2 biggest things that they said is that with tax deeded property, it would benefit them tremendously if the town did the due diligence to identify a title insurance company that's willing to issue title insurance on these lots. Because they go in with a tremendous amount of risk, and truth be told, if they can't get title insurance on the lot, the property is useless. And so I agree, I think that's a good recommendation. The other thing is with that house that needs to be taken down, there's a lot of unknowns for them. They don't know if there's lead, they don't know if there's asbestos, they don't know how much it's gonna cost to demolish that house. The town at the low end could pay for an environmental assessment so that we could advertise with the next request and say, hey, look, here's what you're up against. Or the town could take a step further and do the environmental assessment and demolish the house all on our own, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. But any cost that we incur, we'll be able to return on the sale of the property, assuming that the sale price is high enough. So what we heard from the developers is, hey, you should do a little bit more, you should take the project a little bit farther before you put it back out to bid, so there's fewer questions, which was great feedback. So we're going to take that feedback, plan to re-advertise this spring. The warrant article is structured in such a way that if passed, the select board would have the authority to award the project to whatever developer for whatever price, because it would be town meeting vesting that authority in the select board. And so hopefully around the time that town meeting happens, we'll have be far along in the process, the next RFP process, identify a developer, and get the project going later this year. So actions required, just enough.
So will you be coming back with a proposal for the select board on
Yes.
this?
Yep, yeah, we'll make some adjustments. If we spend, if we have to spend too much money, I'll come back to you, with authorization to spend the money, but I don't think we'll have to spend enough that would trigger coming here. But we'll be doing some due diligence, re-advertising, a pretty similar package and bringing a recommendation back to the board, absolutely.
Select person there?
For transparency and stuff, I have a lot of personal knowledge of that property that might fit on in the future. I don't want to take any action as a selectman that would influence. I will no longer be a selectman. I say financial gain. I am done in mind. I want to make sure everyone knows everything.
Thank you. New business, no new items? Nothing. Right. Final public comment.
Is it on?
Yes.
Daniel Air, 334 Old Concord Turnpike. And owner, president of DE Industrial Service and Supply. Castle Rock, I want to make transparent. I bid on the property and put conditions on it, suggested the board to the fire chief. The 3 houses should never have been built up there. The developer should have brought that up to standard. It was beyond fair, out of principle. And everyone said I was crazy for doing it. I took it on at my own expense, corporation's expense. I do not own the road. It's all through the association. And then with these standards and stuff, they were never enforced and stuff. And then what happened next meeting? A bidder came in. They want to waive it. It's pretty clear, buyer beware. It needs to be brought up. I did it on principle, because of inconsistency. You had a set of rules there, 16 feet, 2 feet shoulders up. Nothing was enforced. Why wasn't this ever enforced by the selectmen? And at my own expense, I did it and stuff. That policy works. I don't agree with the fire chief, the road agent, or other people's recommendations. But if you do, you share all the data and stuff, present it, and get a set of plans, and deal with the state, it can work. But we need to hold feedbacks up. And with these stuff that was presented there, that's why I stayed out of it. I brought that thing up to approved plans from the state, wetlands. Prior to that, there, if you read the rules, I don't agree with them. So you get departments give recommendations. What they understanding, my understanding stuff. You can come to a mutual agreement and stuff through there, or and make the grades right. I believe the code, most of the paperwork I read on the fire code and stuff is from the Great Plains. It doesn't meet the conditions of the Northeast. That's what your job is as the board members. So I think my 3 minutes is up, and I just want to make transparent and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, select person Air, or citizen Air in this case. Sir, would please state your name and.
My name's Kevin Roy. I hope to be a future resident of Barrington. Love the town. I think got to commend all you folks for, maintaining your budgets and everything. I've come from a very expensive area that just is out of control. Anyways, I ask of you to really, from what I understand, there's a moratorium on building on a Class 6. I'm actually looking to build a Class 6 off of Holly Lane. It's actually in pretty good shape, relatively speaking. I'm willing to take on responsibility of the road. I have a brand new tractor coming, a blade box, the whole works. I do whatever, was reasonably asked. But me buying the property, I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this property right now. And it could make or break me buying this. I'm looking to do a single family home where they were originally planning on doing a development. I want to maintain, the spirit of this town, be custodians of that land. So I ask of you to really, consider lifting the moratorium, so at least I can go before the board and present my case.
Moratorium is lifted as of tonight.
It is.
The action we took on the.
Very good. Wasn't quite clear on that.
With the town, is the part with the town?
So, second,
Is it Holly Lane in Route 4?
yes,
You can access off Route 4.
I can, but that's like, well over 800 feet. It's an insane amount of work that's gonna be required to get a driveway up there.
There is it. The, another person bought a house out further out, you want, but you can touch with them.
Up that path there, okay. There, like I said, there, also on, Holly Lane, there's already a home that's already on that class 6 road. It's in relatively good shape. It's well within my, that's really where we would prefer to do it, rather than open up another driveway out onto Route 4. That brings up a whole new can of worms, the costs, bring another driveway on Route 4. That's a state issue and everything else. So I really, like to, continue the couple hundred more feet down and put the driveway off of that if I can. The cost is going to be exorbitant to run up that 800 feet. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paul Mosteller, 83 Washington Street. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy tricentennial. A couple questions. Who developed the goals for the Homestead RFP?
It was the combination of the town administrator working with the planning department.
Town Lands Committee.
Town Lands Committee, but I thought the planning department had some input on that too. Nope.
Town Lands Committee, reviewed it most of the year, submitted it to the Conservation Commission review and Select Board for review.
Can I make some suggestions? I did send that RFP to a couple developers. One, I think you had to remove 55 and older. That development was originally phase 2 that was developed for single family homes. Two, does our master plan not include 55 and older in the village district area that was proposed a few years back? The reason I say is 55 and older, people want to be able to buy amenities, shopping, healthcare. That's about as far away as you can get from the fire station. Two, that number 5, section in that RFP, you really need to take that out. It's directed at school age populations of burden. I think that's, you're crossing the line with fair housing. So I think a lot of those things for the RFP, if you reduce some of those requests, let the process from planning and zoning take care of those, the pile of dirt, wetlands, conservation, and let the developer run it through the program. Just in.
Go ahead, finish with your comments.
The Cochrane contract, that's annual. Is that put out for bid?
Is it question and answer or public comment?
What's that?
I said, is it question and answer or public comment?
We have been so far, so, I mean, I know we did it, went out for bid 5 years ago. It's been a while.
I don't know the specifics.
Can I ask, where are we in the cycle? Because the DRA, every 5 years, every city and town has to reevaluate. Are we in the middle of the cycle?
I mean, so the town did a partial statistical update in 2020. We did a full, or 2021, we did a full revaluation in 2019. We do rolling revaluations in Barrington, so we update values on a 25% each year, and then the full evaluation the 5th year.
Yep.
So
that's why 19 was.
You didn't know that?
No, I knew that.
Yes.
Ask you guys that. I know Will
I
Cochrane.
asked you that question.
Bill Cochrane likes 5-year contracts because the last time was cross-country, and when you overlap with a new company, it actually creates more work for the next company that comes in, and you may see more abatements, thus more work for you guys. Last one, baseline, the tax revenue is $1.36 billion from the town overall, the valuation of all properties in town. Was there an abatement by the utility company at one time last year? Consolidated Communication?
about 10 years ago, Fairpoint started a abatement process in the state. Many communities across the state went to court. The town settled last year, agreeing on a reduced rate, which is a little bit higher than what Eversource was put into by statute. That's been resolved.
That's about it. Thank you.
Politics, conservation, the town lands committee. Did any exclusive work on that and stuff? Everything was brought up, was discussed there.
Okay.
Be in the minutes too.
Question about the title insurance. You got 23 lots. Even if you sold every lot for 100,000, title insurance is going to be about $300 a lot. So that comes out to $6,000. That the developer is thinking the title insurance is going to be a lot of money. I don't think so. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
So if you're participating virtually and you'd like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand using the feature in Teams, or you can unmute yourself, speak up, wait to be recognized by the chair.
Hearing none, at this time, I will close public comment, because I think we've had plenty of time for folks to hop in and participate. Non-public this evening?
Yes,
For
personnel and legal.
personnel and legal.
Select board member.
Oh, yeah, we have,
Oh, yeah.
select board comments.
Like I said earlier, the conservation tried to get a meeting together, but we canceled for the holidays, and then this came up, we couldn't get people went on vacation.
Yeah, the Transfer Station Committee had a meeting on the 20th December. We discussed possibly increasing our income from metal. Talking about changing the vendor. And I'm not sure where we are exactly with that yet. Recycling dropped a lot. Apparently there's a lot of contamination in our recycling, that they dropped from $500 in October to almost $300 in November. Books and textile bins are going well. Thinking about talking to Mr. Fox about composting that's not in yet. There is a styrofoam pilot program that we made that we'd like to take advantage of. We'll see. And we need 2 committee members to go down about 2 regular meetings. Now, school board has a budget hearing tomorrow.
Select person Bailey?
Thank you very much. I went to the library meeting and just, I don't know if everybody's aware, but they had some changes in their leadership. So right now, Lee Elliott is the chair, and Cameron Town is the vice chair. Just a reminder that February is Poetry Month, if anybody's interested. And that's all I have, sir.
All right, select person Sakosha.
So everything's all well, good at the rec. Deck the House winners were announced today as well. The Christmas Dove gave gift cards to the top 3 winners, and they had a lot of interest in the map of lights, or the map of lights. But they're running all their normal programs as pre-COVID minus rumpus room due to the nature of the program with COVID and germs. But basketball is in full swing. Adult drop-ins, Sweetheart Skate is set for February 11th, pending ice. But
Could really be a Sweetheart Skate.
yeah. But in the thick of programming and the planning for 2022, summer camps, before after school care registrations, that information will be coming out in the next few weeks. So people should keep an eye on the website, Facebook, emails, for registration updates.
Planning board meets tomorrow to finalize the warrants for the planning and zoning. And that's it.
Right.
Select person Bailey.
I have one comment I'd ask you to consider and maybe act upon, is that when we receive items sent to us, that they don't come in a read-only fashion, so that we can make notes to them and send them back. I had a couple of documents that I was working on, trying to put my comments to the side of it, and I don't remember which ones they were. Apologize, but please don't give us read-only.
But we can't form a meeting outside of.
No, I think he's just looking to be able to make his notes. Like for me, I have PDF editors, so I can go in and add, or I can add comments
Stuff
down the side.
aside of it, and do it.
He should be able to, I think.
You have written things, though, and you can.
I mean, listen, if the select board wants all electronic documents,
Around.
all about that.
No, I like my paper.
Yeah, well,
It's just a comment. I didn't realize it was gonna get a hoop. Sorry.
All right.
motion to public purpose.
Looking for a, motion to go into non-public for personnel and legal.
I'll make that.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote.
Aye. Aye.
It's Koschak.
Nap aye.
The select board will be returning to public session, to adjourn the meeting. Your camera.
Oh.
Yeah, don't forget that.
So we're gonna,
Welcome back to the Public Select Board meeting. The Select Board discussed two matters, or a few matters of legal and personnel in non-public. There's no announcements to be made public, and be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
air eye.
Sorry, 1 second. Seal non-public minutes indefinitely to avoid adversity.
I'll
Yeah,
make a
sorry.
motion to seal non-public indefinitely, for the, to prevent adverse impact of reputation. Seconded by Select
Air
Person
aye.
Mantrick.
Mantrick, aye.
Nap aye. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Air eye.
Mantrick, aye.
Nap aye.
Thank you.